Hey everybody, it's Chris from Rottweiler Performance. We're here with Upshift Magazine at Breckenridge, Colorado, the KTM Rally. And they asked us to show off this beautiful new 690 that we built. What was the inspiration behind this 690? People ask. Well, we already built a rally bike with the 7-in-1, which everyone's already seen. My history and my passion is Baja racing. I raced Baja for about 10 years, had a few top 10 finishes, did all right down there, and wanted to build a bike that I felt KTM should have shown up down there with back when the Honda XR650 was racing. I wanted to build something that KTM could show up with and just stomp that thing. So this was the inspiration. Admittedly, some of the inspiration was the new styling of the 2019 KTM 690. It just looks like it's doing 100 miles an hour standing still. It borrows a lot from the 500 EXC line. Doesn't have that funky plastic that I just couldn't stand before. It looks really good. So that inspired me to kind of envision what I've never seen done before, and that's build a Baja 690. So right here we have a laser etch right in the clutch cover with our new laser etching machine, Baja 690, and really wanted to kind of put our signature on it. And so what we did with this thing is we wanted to start with the suspension. The suspension's a weak point on these things. They only have about 10¼ inches of travel. So we went with the WP cone valve suspension in front, modified and sprung by Conflict Motorsports. So this has a true 300 millimeters of travel. Now it's a bit of a horse to get on, but it's what it's going to take to really rock those big 3-foot whoops down in San Felipe. So we wanted this thing to handle really, really well. So what I've got in my hands here is a tractive rear shock, modified again by Conflict Motorsports, and we had to do a remote reservoir on this because it just wouldn't fit in this 2019. So the great part about this is we can actually mount this and get the reservoir up front. So in phase 2 on this motorcycle, what we're going to do is actually get the adjusters on some knurled knobs, and we'll be able to actually adjust the rear suspension on the fly, which is really important on this bike because the gasoline is consumed from the rear and it changes the sprung weight of what's happening with this bike. So we'll be able to reach down and dial it in because we've mounted the reservoir up front, and it'll also get cooled a little bit better. So the reason I have this in my hands is because we just got finished by Alex. He did a thrash on it, got a last minute hose put on there, and he brought it out to the rally. So we're going to install this thing at the rally right now. So the rear end will sit up a little bit higher on this bike. Okay, so how did we build this bike, and what mentality, what concept did we go with when we designed it? So what we want to do is actually do something that was a little bit unorthodox for a 690, and that was actually kind of go backwards a little bit. So normally the rotors on this thing, they're large, they're steel, they're heavy, they're very thick, they're 320 millimeters. We actually regressed to a 270 millimeter Tsunami rotor by Galfer and ran a billet Brembo caliper in the front, their works caliper. So we got the most bite out of it, but really wanted to lighten up the front end with that. So with that, we're running W wheels, custom made with Talon hubs, Bulldog spokes, and we've got A60 wheels on this thing, and a 160 in the front and a 215 in the rear, which is a bit narrower for this size of a bike. But what we want to do is try to get the weight down so we can get the suspension to perform the way it's supposed to in Baja, because down there you're attacking whoops that are 3 feet tall and 20 feet apart, and you really need to get railing over these things, and the less weight the better. So with that, we ran a tubeless system in the rear and also a tubeless nitro mousse in the front. So the front tire ended up to be about 2 pounds lighter overall, so that's static weight, that's unsprung weight, and that's rotating mass. In the rear, we were able to pull 4 pounds out of the rear wheel by doing all of this. So the idea, again, is to get this thing performing and reacting as fast as it can and not have a big lumbering 690 that just isn't working, because these aren't known to work all that well, so we're going to do everything we can to get it to work properly. So in the motor department, we've got this bike pretty well covered. There's a lot of horsepower to be had on these things. We can get them up to about 12 more horsepower than stock between our intake system, the mapping, and the exhaust system. So on this, starting with the intake side, we have our brand new 2019 KTM 690 intake system, which is a little bit different from the older models. We've paired that with some Power Commander 5 hardware. So we've got a Power Commander 5 to remap the bike with an auto tune. So this bike is constantly tuning itself. So no matter what conditions you're in, humidity, any altitudes, it'll always be tuning itself to perfection. So it's always running the best it can. We actually have a lean out switch here where we can actually lean it out in case we have to stretch out the miles a little bit if we miss a pit, hypothetically, something like that. And then on the exhaust side, we've got a Tecmo titanium header, which is the lightest header on the market, coupled with an Aero titanium silencer. So between those two, we've dropped a ton of weight off this bike and pulled about 12 more horsepower to the rear tire out of it with that motor combo. Okay, in the lighting department, racing down in Baja, the lighting is critical, and it's basically how fast can you go and not outrun your lights. Well, you're always going to outrun your lights to some degree, especially with this bike. This is a 120 mile an hour bike, so if you've got the balls to do a $120 at night, you know, my hat's off to you. But we ended up with choosing a pair of Cyclops LED 40 watts in a dual fashion, and we have the diffusers in the front that we can actually use to change how the light pattern is spread. So we can pop off you know, one of these diffusers here and have a pencil beam that reaches way out there for speed, and then we can put on kind of a yellow amber light for the spread, which is a little friendlier on the eye. So racing in Baja, the lights are really tricky. So we chose these lights. Now to mount them, we ended up custom making a set of billet adapters that clamp onto the fork. They only clamp on with about maybe 4 Newton meters of pressure. They don't take much, but that allows us to actually adjust them left and right, and we can use the adjustments on the Cyclops up and down, so we have full adjustments with these lights. They don't weigh a thing, so we didn't really have to mount them on the frame. They can actually swing with the pendulum of the front steering axis, so they're going to point where we shoot. But the custom mounts we made in about 6 hours from design to finish, printed a set, tested the printed set, and we actually integrated the brake line guide in the left-hand light mount, you know, to kind of clean everything up and keep everything light. So it was kind of a fun project for us to do. We posted all on Instagram, and a lot of people followed us, so that was kind of a neat project to do. So these lights really, really help at night when you're trying to go fast. All right, so in the controls department, we ended up with a Evo set of handlebars from Pro Taper that are steering damper low. So we've got a BRP clamp on the top to mount to these hand guards. It keeps everything really clean. And then we've got a set of very hard to get X-Trig triple clamps on here that we got through Andrew Short. He was nice enough to send us a set. Apparently these came out of Russia for what we know. And we've got those mounted to a Scott's damper. So it's a really kind of trick front end that you don't see very often on a 690. But the steering damper low bars keep everything low. In Baja, you want to keep everything low and stay low on the bike. As far as the controls department, we've got a Brembo RCS front master cylinder. It's a 14 size piston for the single-sided brakes that are the billet brakes that are on there. Okay, so we have a bit of titanium on this bike. So starting with, we've got Raptor titanium foot pegs. They're pretty much the lightest you can find. As far as the titanium exhaust, the titanium muffler, every single piece of hardware on this bike is titanium, either from ProBolt or a number of different companies. There isn't a bolt you can find that isn't tied. Now, we didn't shave off a ton of weight by doing that, but the idea is to build a works bike, and that's how you do it. So every fastener is titanium. The Raptor pegs are tie, exhaust. So speaking of titanium, obviously weight is a factor on a race bike. You want to get it as light as possible. We've done that with the wheels, we've done it with the tubeless tires, we've done it with the titanium. We also pulled off a lot of bits and pieces that are unnecessary on this bike. So believe it or not, we actually pulled the fan off the radiator, and we pulled the overflow reservoir off as well, because you know, if you're spending all this money on titanium, especially the hardware, you know, in Baja, you're moving fast, and this bike is meant to move fast. You're moving enough air through the radiator. You don't need the fan. So we pulled a big chunk off of that. So from stock, we weighed this thing stock, completely wet. It was 360 pounds. We managed to shave 36 pounds off this bike. We got it down to 314, which is still a little bit heavier than a 450 race bike, but for a 650, pulling 35 pounds off, I'm sorry, a 690, pulling 35 pounds off is quite a feat. So we're really proud of that. This thing should handle really well. So at Rottweiler Performance, the point of a lot of these builds is to really showcase our capabilities, what we represent, the parts that we represent, the parts that we create, and overall our ability to create a race bike like this. And one of our goals is to really kind of become, you know, one of the premier aftermarket manufacturers for custom one-off bikes of this nature. So these are our show pieces, so to speak, that we bring to the rallies and show people, and try to, you know, stir some talk and talk to people about what they may be wanting to get out of a motorcycle, and we can kind of use these to show them what's possible. Okay, everybody, that's it for me. I'm Chris from Rottweiler Performance. Big thanks to Upshift for bringing this out here and doing this video on one of our builds. And stay tuned for more builds from Upshift. They always do a great job, and we'll see you in the next one.